Late last night, Nintendo posted their latest financial numbers for the Switch, how well it's been selling, which is very good, by the way, and I have a couple other thoughts about that we'll talk about in a little bit. But as part of that, one of the bigger pieces of news that have come out is the result of a Q&A section where, again, they were pressed about the possibility of a Switch Pro being something that they're working on or releasing, and the response this time was negative like they've had in the past. This is not the first time they've denied the possibility of working on a new Switch, but the wording this time around was a little bit softer. See, last year in 2020, during a similar Q&A, when Nintendo was asked about whether or not they were working on a Switch Pro, they gave a very clear, no uncertain terms, we are not working on new hardware right now, this is not a thing we're planning on having coming out this year, it's just not a thing we're doing. This time around, when pressed with a similar question, the answer given is slightly more ambiguous, specifically that they are not planning on making an announcement anytime soon. Now, there's a couple things here to really focus on. First off, not planning to make an announcement versus not something we're working on. Saying they're not making an announcement does lead the kind of open space to consider, oh, there might be something we're working on, we're just not ready to talk about that yet, which is a very common lingo for when people ask about things in development and they just don't really want to talk about it. The other part of this answer, though, that is doing a lot of heavy lifting is that wording of anytime soon, because soon obviously is kind of a loose term. It could be that we're talking about within the next 3 months. We could be talking about for the rest of this year. They could be talking about sometime next year using a kind of relative scale of how long the Switch has been around. It's really not a specific answer. And so, of course, this ambiguous wording is leading to two very different kinds of reactions on the internet right now. One, look, see, here again, they're saying they're not working on one or they're not planning on talking about one anytime soon. Let's stop talking about Switch Pro right now because it's probably not going to be a thing anytime soon. Or other people seeing that going, they're hiding something, they're working on that Switch Pro, it's coming out this year, I can tell it's happening right now, they're dodging the question. And really, both of these stances I think hold about as much weight because they're both pulling from the same very ambiguous kind of thing. Now, I will say personally where I land on the spectrum is that I do think that a Switch Pro is likely not something that will happen this year. I do think that it is a possibility that Nintendo could be working on some kind of improved version of the Switch, whether that's a new system or a dock replacement or something. There's all kinds of theories of what a Switch Pro could be, but personally, I don't think that's a thing happening this year. I did a video a couple weeks ago when the Mario Red Switch was revealed, talking about the fact that the reveal of that system was not a great sign for a potential Switch Pro this year, because traditionally, when you look at Nintendo's history, they don't really release any special edition systems close to the launch of a new model refresh. Now, at the time, I gave it a little more leeway because I was like, oh, well, technically the 35th anniversary was last year, so maybe the special edition was planned for earlier and it got pushed back. Maybe that got pushed back, but a Switch Pro could still come out sometime later this year. But after that reveal, we got another special edition announcement for a Monster Hunter Rise edition Switch. We're not actually getting the US just yet, that hasn't been confirmed, but at least in Europe and Japan, that is a special edition that's coming out in March, which is even further along in the timeline, really pushing back that idea of when a Switch Pro could be released. With that in mind, plus that answer in this Q&A call, I'm definitely pushing for the idea that if Switch Pro is real, if that is a thing that Nintendo is even working on in the first place and it is happening, I really don't think it's this year. If it at the absolute soonest, they could maybe announce it near the very end of the year and have a surprise launch during the holiday season. But I really doubt that. One thing, too, that I've seen a lot of people bring up and kind of latch onto is the idea of, oh, well, it would make a lot of sense if they do release a Switch Pro, that it would be released coincide with Breath of the Wild 2, because Breath of the Wild 2 is the next really big thing we're looking for from Nintendo and make a great launch title for a redone system. And honestly, I don't actually put a lot of stock in that. If this was something where it was a completely brand new system that replaced the Switch and actually needed you to upgrade in order to play newer games, I could see that as a possibility. But that has not been what most people are talking about when they talk about a Switch Pro. The whole idea has just been a more powerful version that supports the same game library as the regular Switch, but is able to push it to higher resolutions and really, in my opinion, more importantly, maybe stabilize that frame rate for some of the games that really push it, especially in handheld mode. And so with that in mind, I don't think there really is any kind of requirement that Breath of the Wild 2 coincides with this new system. And really, if either of these were to happen this year, I'm much more on the side of Breath of the Wild 2 being a holiday launch 2021, with Switch Pro being something that happens in 2022. Again, if that is something Nintendo is really truly working on. Because to be honest, I'm even having my doubts about that at this point. The fact of the matter is that as is, the Switch is still continuing to sell very, very well. Total Switch sales have now surpassed the 3DS lifetime sales in just 4 years of having existed, a little less than actually, and the Switch Lite by itself has now basically passed up the Wii U. Clearly, the demand is still overall there, and yes, it has been slowing down compared to past years, but a lot of that could also be tied to the fact that last year was relatively slow as far as releases go. We had a couple of very large ones like Animal Crossing, but compared to the kind of non-stop release windows we were seeing back in 2018 and 19, it was a little bit slower. And so depending on what they have coming out this year, that could really cause a lot of extra energy to happen that a new system might not be necessary for. Also, real quick, I'm planning on doing a more dedicated video about this, but because it is a statistic that came up with all these finances, the Switch outselling the 3DS is awesome. That's showing how well the Switch is doing, but it also tells me a lot of you guys need to go and actually buy a 3DS, because that system has an amazing library. It is still a better portable than the Switch in some ways, and it has so many different beautiful designs you can try to track down. Honestly, the biggest reason why I have a problem with a lot of Switch special editions is because none of them live up to what Nintendo did with the later 2DS and 3DS designs, like this insane Zelda one right here. This is the kind of stuff I want to see Nintendo start to experiment with on the Switch, whether it's on the system itself or just giving us a really fancy, cool-looking dock. I do agree with a lot of people that the ambiguous wording Nintendo used in that Q&A does kind of lightly imply the fact that a Switch Pro is actually maybe a thing, but I just don't believe that, especially with the wording of anytime soon, that it's something that could happen this year. Between the special editions and all that kind of stuff, it's not something I see happening. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you think Switch Pro is likely going to happen this year? Do you think it's going to be something for 2022 or maybe even further ahead? Is Nintendo just not even going to make one possibly? And if they do make one, what form do you think it's going to take? Which, by the way, if a Switch Pro does end up being an actual real thing, of course I'm going to pick it up and review it and compare it to the Switch Lite and regular Nintendo Switch, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future potential content if that's real. If not, we're still doing other cool stuff, I swear, I promise.